Hey, guys. Altovise spells here, your voice manager. I unmute the voice of women who are ready to speak up about what has kept her silent for way too long. And this is another episode of the hashtag SpeakEasy Podcast. Can we just be clear and honest on this one, guys? I'm gonna go ahead, I'm removing the curtain and I'm gonna say it. I sucked at communication, utterly sucked at it for years, for the majority of my life, for so many reasons. And we're going to type into that today because of the amazing guests that I have on. But let's just be honest, we were never really taught 100% how to properly communicate with people, especially in stressful situations or intense moments. We were not always taught how to communicate, or the ways we were taught were kind of like a little janky. So we're gonna we're gonna highlight a little bit of that, because as business owners you have to communicate. I know some of you are just like cringe right at that moment, but it's okay. I got you. Trust me, I do. With that being said, I want to say hello, Lee. How are you?
Hello, Altovise. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing great now. I've definitely had some practice in better communication skills. Uh, some hard moments, but before we get into all of that, Lee, let the studio audience know a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go ahead and dive in.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So, a little bit about my background. I'm from New Jersey, was very fortunate, got a full athletic scholarship to play football at Penn State University. Ended up being a captain there. So, someone who was in front of people and being forced to communicate and speak and motivate and do all those things as well. I happen to be a speech communication major at Penn State. So some of that will help our conversation. Did not play professionally. I went directly into a corporate role and working for Merrill Lynch as a human resources professional. So spent 15 years helping build teams through human resources at a variety of corporations: Merrill Lynch, Johnson and Johnson, Price Waterhouse Coopers. Did that for 15 years and then left to do the full-time speaking thing. So I am a full-time keynote speaker. So I am, when we're not in COVID, on stages all across the country, and now quite a bit on Zoom, delivering messages via Zoom and other online platforms. But I am a full-time communicator.
So I'm going to say I was maybe about a 10% communicator.
Okay.
But I've learned along the way some great communication skills as a speaker,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy for me because when I took my course in speaking in college, my professor said, I don't really think that this is the route you should go.
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious about the courage you had to take a speech class in college.
I think it was necessary. I don't think it was courage at
Well,
all.
I'll be honest, and I think this is an important statement to make right up front. It's important for everybody,
Hmm.
and often too many people who don't think it's their thing will avoid it. They'll run away from it as opposed to delving into it and putting themselves up to that challenge. So I commend you for that.
Yeah, now that I can say that I was always, especially at that time, I was very tenacious. I was, and matter of fact, as I was finishing up my associate's degree, I was pregnant. I literally in the middle of the semester gave birth to my to my daughter, and I had my husband at the time go to the school to pick up a take home exam for one of my courses. And they were like, they didn't even realize that I was pregnant,
Wow.
but very, very, I was, let's go for it, whatever that was. And so I took some courses that were kind of outside of the norm for my temperament. Because
Sure.
I'm that behind the scenes person. I'm an introvert. And so I took some things that were outside of my temperament. But yeah, that class was a doozy.
Sure. Sure.
It was a doozy. So when we talk about communication, though, one of the things that we have to kind of start at the root of it. And the root of it is most of us learn communication not by being taught how to communicate, but by what we see.
Correct.
And so, with that being said, let's okay, I'm not calling you old SpeakEasy podcast listeners. I'm not calling y'all old, but for those of you who at a later stage in life are saying that they need better communication skills, where do they start?
That's a good question. I think at its very simplest form, communication is, in my opinion, from my perspective, is to do more than exchange information. Communication, the objective is to do more than for me to get information to you. What we're really trying to do when we communicate is to make a connection, is to get you and I on the same page so that we're in some type of an agreement. Because if all we're doing is sending information, that's pretty rote, it's pretty basic, and it's not really completing what we're trying to do. There's no need for me to give you information or to get information from you if there's no connection or there's no reason for us to be on the same page. Does that make sense? And so the
That's
reason I
perfect.
said
Makes perfect
everybody,
sense.
the reason I said everybody should have some type of communication course is because typically when we talk about communicating, what we're talking about is our ability to articulate information. And that's only part of it. The reality is most people who think they're great communicators are not, because they're not good listeners. Because the objective is not for me to just give you information well, charismatically and articulately. It's for you and I to make sure that we're communicating, that we're connecting, that we understand each other. And so my starting point is always, we're trying to do more than just get information from point A to point B. And how well that's done and how smoothly that's done and how emotionally intelligent that's done, that's all great. But at its basic foundational level, if you don't hear what I'm saying and I don't hear what you're saying, and we're not making a connection, we're really not communicating.
I love that you put it that way because we often hear people uh, in the movies. We often hear people saying, "Yeah, you hear me, but do you understand me?"
Absolutely.
That piece of it, like you hear me, but do you really understand me? And parents, I know right now you're like cheering because you're like, yes, because that's the problem that you may have with your children. But something that I've found over the years is that, yeah, part of the reason why I wasn't a great communicator was because two things. One, I I wasn't immediate with my responses.
Okay.
And sometimes when you take that time to mull it over, um, that's communication as well. And so it led to some tension. It led to um, feelings that, it wasn't supposed to lead to that, but that was one thing. The other thing is, am I hearing their words or am I hearing their heart? And I would confuse the two. With me hearing their words, I would confuse it with me hearing their heart.
I get that. I understand that. Here's what's interesting. Both of those issues go to the heart of very common mistakes in communication. So when you talk about being an introvert and being, I'll add some words to it, maybe not that you're saying, but that other listeners may be feeling, right? I'm shy. Um, I'm not a boastful person, right? So what's interesting is that's a very self-centered approach to communication. So one of the greatest fears of Americans, right? It's death and dying, heights, arachnophobia, snakes. But at the top of the list, if not one, it's the top three, is the fear of public speaking. Right? People like you could ask people to walk a tightrope across a mountain before you ask them to get up in front of an audience and speak. And if you really think about that, what happens is they can have a conversation with you one on one very easily. But the minute they're the center of attention, the minute that they're being viewed, it changes the whole dynamic of communication. And so now they're worried about how they're perceived as opposed to what's really being communicated. And as strange as that sounds, that's really a self centered approach because it's not about you. It's about what we're communicating and the fact that we're trying to get on the same page. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And so when you can flip that switch mentally where I'm not so concerned about how I'm being perceived, I don't have to mull things over 20 times to make sure that I'm saying the right thing, that the objective here is really for us to work through this until we both understand the message and not so concerned about the messenger.
Ooh, I love that you said that. Uh, I think another piece of it, especially when we think about the entrepreneur, is communication through marketing, communication through social media, communication through, and man, so many times the communication just it goes way left. Someone can make a statement today, and 5 years from now, it's looked at and perceived in a different way. And man, it just kind of just takes a life of its own. But that is kind of where we have been all of our lives. That's where it's
Agreed.
always oh, well, it's not what they meant, it's what it meant to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. So you're touching on something else that's really important because I'm a business owner too, and I was guilty of this earlier in my career, especially as a speaker, when I would communicate in my marketing, being a self-centered communicator. It was here's what I can do, here's how awesome I am, here's how wonderful my message is, and fortunately I learned that that's not really the intent or the objective. The objective of it should be how is it going to benefit my audience, how is it going to benefit the hearer. Once again, it's not coming from a self-centered place. It's how does what I share benefit you, and if it's not a fit, then you don't hire me. But I can't just put stuff out there that's all about me. It's how does what I share benefit you? And I think when communicators or marketers are most effective, it's when they're hitting the nerve and they're identifying the issue, the pain points, the insecurities, the weaknesses, the needs of the listener. That the listener says, wow, maybe we should pursue this and see what that person's product or service can bring to us. So again, when we're talking about communication, it's not just about putting information out there, it's seeing if there's a connection.
I think that's one of the reasons why I love doing the podcast so much, is because I get to communicate with those entrepreneurs who within their first 5 years and say, hey, I understand what you're going through. I've been there, I've dealt with it. I cried probably sometimes more than I should have, but it's because I've lived through that. And, I want to make sure that I'm pouring back into them what it is that, can help them in whatever brick wall may be standing in front of them, giving them the mallet or the jackhammer, whatever they need to kind of break that down. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited about having you as a guest, because again, depending on where we grew up, depending on our temperament, depending on so many different things, communication takes on a personal feel. But there are some key elements that really do say, okay, no, these are the key things that you need to pay attention to when it comes to communicating. And so with all of the experiences, I'll say not opportunities, the experiences that you've had in communicating in different industries, what has been the toughest industry for you to communicate in?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I pride myself, or my strength as a speaker is on my ability to engage an audience. I think, um, again, if you can't connect with people on a personal human level, it's going to be difficult getting them to receive or embrace or absorb the information that you're trying to share. So with that said, I think the toughest audience, not necessarily an industry, but the toughest audience I had, and it's actually a funny story, was a group of police officers. And here's why: because I gauge my level of engagement by the response, and you can kind of feel if people are feeling you. And so I'm giving them my best. I mean, these are police officers, people who protect and serve, and I'm giving them my best stuff, and they're sitting there stoic and just looking straight ahead. They're not laughing at my jokes. They might snicker a little bit. And so after about 40, 45 minutes of just like giving it to them, I finished up, and I just thought I bombed. Like they just looked at me like like I wasn't there. And so I finished the talk. They finished the event, and I come off stage, and there's a line of like 15, 20 officers standing there talking about, man, that was one of the most powerful speeches I've ever heard, and it really moved me. I said, it moved you? You should have told your face to express somehow that that you were
Right?
moved.
Like, which part of you did it move? Wait a
I didn't
minute.
see any movement. But that's just who they are. They're trained to be, right, unemotional, and like it was the strangest thing. So I've learned, because I've done other both military and law enforcement groups since then, and so I don't look for the immediate response and the laughter and the high fives when I speak to that group. But that was tough because, again, I was looking for some type of response to validate what I was saying. But the reality is, I was communicating, and it did have an impact.
Well, I'm glad that it had an impact because I
Yeah, it was a
think as
long. It would have been a long drive home because I.
exactly, that is one of the worst experiences, is doing an event and afterwards you're like,
Yeah,
so so that didn't go well.
yeah, exactly. But back to the point I'm really trying to drive home. It's not about you. It's really not about you. And when I'm talking to young speakers who are getting into the business and they have that struggle, and they're concerned about how they're being perceived, I tell them, you're delivering a package. It's a very valuable package, right? And so all the things that you're concerned about how you're being perceived, I'm not saying get up there and be shabby, and I'm not saying get up there and don't be professional and don't be sharp and don't be witty and funny. No, you should. But all of those hangups on how we're perceived is hurting your ability to deliver your message. And I give them this analogy, right? When somebody comes and delivers a package to your house, whether it's UPS or FedEx, right, and it's something that you're really anticipating, there's high level of expectancy. When they bring it to you, you really don't care about the messenger or the deliverer, right? You don't care what they were wearing or how, like, you don't care. As long as you delivered this message to me, this package to me, I'm not so concerned about you. And I think we get hung up on everybody's so concerned about us when really what they want and what they need is what you're delivering, what that message is. And so be an effective messenger, but don't get so hung up that it hinders your ability to deliver the message.
I think you just broke something for a lot of the listeners because that's where they get stuck because they feel like, okay, I'm live streaming and I'm only getting one or two people in the live stream. I'm on Clubhouse and there's only five people coming
Right.
into the room. No matter what medium they're using, they're
Right.
saying, I don't see the big numbers. And that has always been a very valuable lesson that I had to learn early on is I had to go back to sometimes it's just the message for the one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with technology today, you're never ever talking to just one in the here and now. These messages live on. And so someone may pick this up a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, and it be a pertinent message because our stuff lives, right? The blog posts, the recordings, YouTube. So you got to be focused on the delivery of a pertinent and valuable message now. And if you do that, those things will come. It's funny, I say this all the time. I don't care if there's one person in the room or 1,000 people in the room. I'm bringing my A game because that person or those people deserve they're here to hear something that's going to benefit them. Yeah.
So now I have to ask this question. As a communicator,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, we are as speakers, podcasters, we're often, very critical of the rooms that we're stepping into. We're very critical of the messages that we're sharing. So, but we're also very critical of who's sharing messages with us. With that being said, what is the most valuable message that was shared with you that has inspired you to keep going?
You're gonna make me pick one, huh? I don't know if there's one specific message, but there is one specific idea, and it's be you, be authentically you. One of the things I learned early in the speaking business is you got to be you because people can read, they can pick up quickly whether you're just regurgitating somebody else's stuff or if you're being you. And you model yourself after certain speakers and you like the way certain people present, and you like their use of humor or you like their use of PowerPoint slides. That's all fine. You can pull from people, but that message is never going to get through effectively if you're not being authentic. And I'll admit I struggled with that early because, and this may sound crazy, and we may have talked about this during our initial meeting. um, I felt like my story was inadequate because I didn't have some major tragedy that I had to overcome. I was looking at all these other speakers and I was sharing platforms with people who were paralyzed or who had climbed these mountains with no legs, and you know they were in jail and had overcome X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I don't have that kind of story. Like, are people going to hear me? And like there was a level of insecurity and inadequacy because I didn't have their story. And what I learned is my story, and I bring to the table a unique perspective, a unique set of experiences, and I can only be me. And so the idea is, it's a long answer to a very short question. uh, is be you, be you. Your experiences, take what you've learned from those experiences that can benefit others. Here we go with that again, right? Because it's not about you. It's not about, hey, you guys should love my story. It's, here's how my story can help you.
It wasn't a long answer. It was the perfect answer. Because
Wow.
again, I know from experience that first 5 years, man, you find yourself trying to look like, sound like, be like, market like everybody else because you figure they're successful. So if I do what they do and look like them, I'm going to be successful too. And I found that out the hard way. I tell people the first 3 courses that I launched, I got no response. And that was with a social media following, that was with people engaged, and I got no response. But, the first time I did a membership community, I got some engagement and it's still going strong 4, almost 5 years later. Sometimes you got to do what's going to work best for you, not necessarily what's somebody
Agreed.
else is doing.
Agreed. And a lot of that is trial and error, and you got to have the persistence and the bullheadedness to just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. Um, there's just no way around that. You just have to be persistent. You just can't quit.
I love it. I love it. So now, my final question to you.
Okay.
What is your favorite book on communication?
Ooh, my favorite book on communication. Uh, it may be The Five Love Languages.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I'm not sure if that's the name of the book, the title of the book, but I
Mm-hmm.
believe it is The
Yep.
Five Love Languages, because what it speaks to is people come from different places and people approach things differently, and you got to listen and understand as much as you try to articulate. So can I tell you a quick funny story? Because this is a piece
Oh, most definitely.
in one of my books. I wrote a book called Win, Simple Insights to Help You Win the Game of Life, right? And so there's a story, it's called Mars, Venus, and a Gift Bag. So I've been married for 25 years, and communication is typically at the core of all marital issues, right? The issue is rarely the issue. It's usually communication about the issue, right? And so we had this experience. We captured it in a story, and it's been a big hit. In fact, I may do a whole talk, a whole full 60-minute keynote on this idea because it's really about communication. So I had a male buddy who lived in the area. He had just gotten a new apartment, and my wife and I picked out this housewarming gift for him. It was a set of coasters, right? A nice set of coasters. And interestingly enough, we found them at Target. We just found these nice set of coasters at Target. So I was going to bring it to him, right? And so they were on a table, and I grabbed the bag, and the coasters were still in the Target bag. And my wife saw it. She was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, wait a minute. You're not taking those over there in a Target bag. This is a gift, right? And so she goes in her group, she's got this little set aside package of repurposed gift bags, right? And so she goes and she finds, now, mind you, she was thoughtful, like it was a masculine, it was a dark, solid blue gift bag, whatever. And she put the coasters in the gift bag. I'm like, babe, I'm not going to another man's house with no gift bag. and she was like, well, why not? So that became a whole conversation, right? And so she's like, it was just a typical Mars Venus conversation, right? Just from two different perspectives, two different angles, two different approaches. And that's really what happens in life, whether it's male, female, or two different departments at work, or two different positions on a sports team. We're coming at it from two different perspectives. And so we finally talked it through, and here was the agreement. You're going to find this funny. That the coasters were going in the gift bag, but the gift bag was going in the Target bag. Yeah, so I could bring the Target bag, but ultimately he was gonna get He was going to get
I
the,
absolutely love
and so
that.
in the book, I borrow a quote from Leo Tolstoy. And the quote says, marriage is not about how compatible you are. It's about how we deal with incompatibility.
I love
And
that.
so Altovise, this is really a subject we could talk for days about, but it's really about communication. And once we seek to understand and not just be understood, I think we'll all be much better off, because it's not about how you perceive me. It's really about us getting on the same page and making a connection.
Absolutely awesome. Speakeasy Podcast listeners, I hope you were taking notes. If not, it's okay. They have this little cute button on there. It's called pause. You pause it and you rewind and you go and listen to it again. Share it out with a friend. Uh, when it comes to communication is definitely the key to our success, because, man, there are going to be those moments where we need to speak up, those moments where we need to communicate something that's very valuable and important, and even those moments where we need to be silent. And so that process of learning all of those things, it takes time. It takes time. Don't think that it has to be something that you can turn on off, in 24 hours. It definitely takes some time. And so I love this conversation. Lee, let them know where they can get the book, how they can reach out to you, and do you have anything else coming up? I know everything is virtual right now, but what speaking events you may have coming in the near future?
All right, let me see if I remember the questions and try to answer them in order. The best place to find me and all of my stuff is my website, lee-rubin-speaks.com. And that's Lee Rubin, Rubin, speaks.com. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because my audience is primarily business professionals. I do spend some time on both Twitter and Instagram. My handles there for both of those places is L Rubin 39, LRUBIN 39. Um, you mentioned going virtual. So in 2020, because we were sort of shut down and wasn't able to travel, I created an online course of the 5 components of extraordinary teams. My expertise is around team building, and one of the key components in that is communication. In fact, the third component is communicate, communicate, communicate 3 times, because it's that important. And on both Twitter and Instagram, I've got references to my online course. And in terms of speaking, most of my events are private events at corporations and professional associations. But if you follow me on either of those sites and there's something public, I will share them, or things that or point you to my YouTube channel where you can see some of my videos.
That's great. I know a lot of people are probably like, yeah, I need to hear more of him and what he speaks on, because uh I mean, because us women, we're better communicators at times. And then their men are better communicators at times. And so you'll always have some people that'll go, oh no, I need to hear what else he has to say, because I
And
need to put
you
it in
just
my
said it.
arsenal.
You just said it. We need to listen.
Hmm.
We need to listen. Communication is more than how well you articulate, how well you write, how well you speak, how well you portray yourself, even on video. We're missing the other piece, and that's listening.
This is going to be, this is an amazing episode. Uh, Knowing what I had to go through in order for me to become a better communicator within my family, within my business, it was a process, guys. I know, Speakeasy listeners, I know you wish that we could do the whole Thanos thing and just snap it and it just changed, but it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah,
And sometimes that even means going back and apologizing for some things that were miscommunicated. But here's the thing, it can be done.
that's right. So again, I come from a sports background, and the only way to get better at anything is practice.
Practice.
It's the only way to get better at anything, whether it's the 10,000-hour rule or concepts like that. The only way to get better is through practice.
I love it. SpeakEasy listeners, this is all for you because guess what? Without the SpeakEasy podcast listeners, there would be no SpeakEasy podcast.
That's right.
I appreciate y'all. So let me know how this episode resonated with you by leaving a review on your favorite podcasting platform or come join the conversation bit.ly/World Voice Community. We want to hear from you because listen, communication is key to success. With that being said, I'm your host, Altovise. And until next time, don't forget to press it out. See you guys.